Welcome back again, everyone, to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. This is Cody, and I'm here with Justin today. We're going, the two of us, to talk about a video game series here, which you maybe can see on the title already of the episode, but we will go into that in just a minute here. Let's take a look at what we've been up to recently. We'll give Justin first glance at that. How you been, Justin?
Hanging in there. It's been a long week, but I have found time to actually, pursue some actual hobbies and stuff. So I finally got my copy of Dredge a while ago, and I've
Yay.
been yeah, it only took like a month after the dang thing came out. So I've been playing through that. I got an ending. We'll see if I decide to go back and get any of the others. But the one I got felt well, we'll get to that when we review it in a week or so. Other than that, I have also started playing one of, I think this was on my top 10 and most anticipated games list when we did that a while back. That is Labyrinth of Galeria, The Moon Society, which is it's a traditional old school first person dungeon crawler with some modern gameplay elements added in. And I'm really enjoying it so far. It's everything I wanted it to be, which in a game like that, it's all about the exploration. It's all about discovering things and finding hidden paths and whatnot. And it's just a very these sorts of things are my comfort games. And it has been a very just familiar, comforting experience with a few surprises here and there. I'm very thoroughly enjoying that one.
Nice. Should
Yeah.
mention your copy of Dredge did beat my copy of Curse of the Sea Rats.
You're still waiting on that?
Yep.
Oof. Have there been any updates or like any outreach from the
I got
developers?
an email last night from them. I forget because I've been talking to them on Kickstarter, Discord, Facebook, Twitter, and email.
Oof.
And one of the responses, they again responded, "Oh, send us your email that you used and we'll get back to you." And I did right away, and nothing.
Oh, well, in their defense, they didn't say when they'd get back to you, so they haven't explicitly lied.
That's true, I guess. But anyway, you were saying other
Yeah.
activities or enjoyment you've been having? Some
Uh,
video gaming?
pretty much just gaming. Getting a little bit of writing done here and there,
Nice.
mainly stuff for my Pathfinder game, which seems to be periodically on hiatus because of well, it's hard to organize something like that as an adult. Finding a time when like four other people can actually get together to sit down for a few hours to play something
Yeah,
on a
and
regular
when you
basis.
do those, do you do like a set day of the week?
Usually it's on Saturdays because I
Okay.
mean we're all yeah, like I said, we're all adults, we're all gainfully employed, so that's theoretically a time when we're all free, but
Yeah,
life gets in the way.
sure.
Um, but it is still a very fun hobby. And given that it's been such a stretch between the last session and this one, I've got a lot of stuff lined up. So whenever we do actually sit down again, it should be a good time. It's just a matter of finally nailing people down to come and play. So but I
Nice.
do enjoy the planning of all that. So, and
Sounds
what about you?
well. It's interesting. We're recording this here on early part of May, and I feel like normally I'm kind of waiting for summer to hit because I have a lot of summer plans or things I'm looking forward to, movies or games or trips or whatever. And this is an unusual year because a lot of the things I'm looking forward to are coming up very soon here. So, in about 5 hours or so today, I'll be going to see Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which I'm very excited to go see that. That was somewhere near the top of my top 10 movies I wanted to see this year. Looks like I had that as my number one, actually, because I have that list handy here. And then
Nice.
I'll have ticked off my top three movies that I wanted to see this year with Guardians, Ant-Man, Quantumania, and Mario Brothers. And also one honorable mention with Dungeons and Dragons. So that's good. I'm excited for that. And then also 5 days from now, we get the 5 days from when this episode is being recorded, we
Mhm.
get the release of Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel finally, Tears of the Kingdom, which I've been waiting for I forget, is it 6 or 7 years now since the other one
At
came out?
least
It's
at least six, yeah.
it's kind of crazy. There's a lot of debate about that one in the family because when we
Mhm.
played the original one, that was like maybe the first game my kids like really latched on to like trying to play it and the story and like got invested in everything.
Mhm.
And we took turns playing it a little bit here or there, like a half hour turn, and we'd watch each other play because it was all new to us. My son must have been extremely young at the time, now that I think about this, but I think he did try to play it. And so now we're kind of curious if we have the patience to play another game in that style, because now they're like playing their own games, and like we don't play too many single person narrative games together anymore. So
Oh,
can we come together to sit and watch somebody else play a game is going to be kind of interesting, and now they have phones and iPads and other things too. And like they're really looking forward to it, but like our attention may not be as singularly focused as it was 6 or 7 years ago. So I don't know how that's going to work, but we're going to figure that out in pretty soon here. We pre-ordered that, I think, like a year and a half ago. So which is good I did, because I pre-ordered it on Amazon for 60 and then Nintendo jacked the price up to 70, but because Amazon price guarantee, I only paid 60. So haha.
handy.
Yeah. So there's that. And I think those are the two things I'm excited for at the moment. As far as what I've actually been doing though, two things I guess I'll mention. One, I made this goal, and I've said it on the podcast before, that I wanted to have no video games I was in the middle of when Zelda came out. So I am still playing Assassin's Creed 2. I don't know how much is left of the game. I'm going to gather probably like a third to a fourth left yet. So I don't know if that's going to be feasible to finish, but I'm trying. And
Well,
I'm
it
trying to.
depends. Are you going after all the feathers or whatever those collectibles were?
Yeah, no, I have some feathers, but I haven't really looked for them. I'll be honest. It's just if I see one, I pick it up, and I'm not using any walkthroughs or stuff like that.
Okay.
But I am picking up every treasure chest on the maps when they come out, and doing all of the like assassins contracts and races and free runs and like all of those types of missions. I'm doing everything that pops up on the map. Essentially, I'm doing
Okay.
to 100%. But I just got Altair's armor last night, so I'm close to the end game. I think I just don't know. I just finished like chapter 8, I think, and I don't know if there's 10 or 12 chapters, so that's going to be a big difference if there's one versus the other.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'll get through that or not, but if I do, that's that. And then the other thing I would say is, I actually started, get this, reading a book again. I know I don't read many books every year, I'll be quite honest. But we were at Anderson's bookstore, where you and Jess got the certificates for the kids.
Yeah.
And Cameron wanted a book, and the book was out of stock, and they didn't know if they were going to get any more in. So what I did was essentially pulled a little switcheroo here. And while the kids were at music one day, I walked to from their music lesson down to Barnes and Noble and bought the book that she wanted because they had it there. And then I took her gift card, and then I walked over to Anderson's, and then I used her gift card at there for me. And then so she got the book she wanted, and then I ended up getting a book. But anyway, long story short, I got a book you might have read before called oh crap, what's the first word? Visit from the Goon Squad, is that what it's called?
Maybe that does
Now I
not
forgot the
sound
name.
familiar.
Anyway, it's a Jennifer Egan book, and
Okay.
she was one of the authors that we read in grad school that I really liked. She had a book called The Keep, which was kind of this like a little supernaturally type realistic fiction.
Okay.
And I really liked that book when we read it. I have read one other book of hers called, boy, what's it called now? Now You See Me, or something like that.
Okay.
And that one I was less crazy about, but
Okay.
I think I might have another one of A Visit from the Goon Squad. Yeah. Another one of hers, maybe in the basement. But anyway, she's an author I enjoyed then. So I was like, I'm going to pick up a new book of hers and just see if I get back into it. Because usually, if you like an author's style, you like most of what they do.
Sure.
So I picked it up. I'm like 4 or 5 chapters in right now. And it's okay so far. Like we're still kind of in the get to know the characters phase. I feel like I don't know where the story is even really going yet at this point. But
Okay.
I was very surprised when I was reading the book cover, because obviously grad school was not yesterday, it was a while back here.
I feel that.
Yeah, but she has only put out 6 books, which I was quite surprised by. Like her entire whatever the whatever the discography version of books is, your entire collection that you've written there, I guess. She's only had 6 since way back then, so including the new one that they had on the shelf next to this one, which I gather is like a pseudo sequel or something to the one I'm reading. So
Okay.
But anyway, I was kind of surprised just because usually authors are a little more prolific if they're well read and well selling.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
so that's going on.
the word you were looking for was bibliography, by the way.
There you go. There
Yeah.
you go. I knew it was something out there, but
Yeah. No worries.
yeah, so that's what I've been up to recently.
Cool.
So yeah, all kinds of
Cool.
good things there. Well, should we get into our main topic tonight?
I think so. We've shot the shit for a good bit here.
I think so also. Well, as our viewers at home can't tell because they're not on camera with us, but if they were, they would be able to see my background right now, which is a screenshot. I don't actually know if that's from an actual game or a fan made one. I don't feel like that's actually from a game, but maybe it is. Of some of the
Yeah.
characters from one of the games we're going to discuss tonight. So we are going to take a look at the 3 most recent games from the Fire Emblem series. This is, I guess, not a true trilogy in the sense of the form, because it's just kind of along the lines of this actual gaming series, but we will give this a little chitter chatter today. So 3 most recent games, which we'll go into in a little bit here, would be Fire Emblem Three Houses, Fire Emblem Three Hopes, and Fire Emblem Engage. We'll talk about those. But Justin, how did you first get into the Fire Emblem games? Did you ever play any of the old ones?
Yes, but I think my first introduction to this series was probably the same as a lot of Westerners, and that was in Super Smash Brothers, Melee specifically,
Good
because
call.
because I mean everyone knows like Mario and Donkey Kong and Pikachu and all that, but then there's this Marth guy. It's like who the heck is Marth? And
Yeah.
it shows the series he's from. It's Fire Emblem, and I had never heard of that before. So yeah, that was my first tentative exposure to it, and then I decided to go and seek out what there was of the series a year or two later. And um not that I have to put out a disclaimer just so we don't get in trouble. I don't encourage any sort of piracy, but this was the wild west of the internet, and I played the first game emulated, the Game Boy Advance version of it. So I just searched it out on some site that probably doesn't exist anymore. And I think it was even a fan translation, so I don't even know if the game was actually out in the US yet or not. But so I tracked it down, played it, and I loved it. Um, I had played other games of that style before, strategy RPGs, but this one had a layer of depth to it that really made it stand out. Nice sprite art, good, likable characters, and yeah, that was my first true exposure to Fire Emblem as a whole, if you don't count Smash Brothers. I have since purchased other games that have come out when they've come out, but in terms of my first getting acquainted with it, that was how it happened. How about you?
Yeah, I think the first exposure, I think you nailed it right on the head, had to be Smash Brothers, just because it had Roy and Marth in the first one for Melee for the GameCube, and I'm trying to recall. I think they were the only 2 sword users in that game, were they not?
I think so.
And so that kind of immediately set them apart from like the typical Nintendo fare characters, because Mario's got like Fireball or whatever, but then you got these 2
Well, I mean,
guys
there
with
was Link.
swords, right? Oh yeah, they had Link, I guess
Link,
that's
yeah.
true. But they were really unique. I mean, even Link in that game even was, very diversified with his attacks with bombs, and I don't even remember which
Boomerangs and
ranks,
yeah.
other things he had there. So probably I think it's a series I had heard of before that, just probably from Nintendo fandom, but this was a game that I didn't really get into until much later in the series here. And it's funny you mentioned the fan translation here. So I just found some information about this series as a whole online here. So I'll share just a bit of that with us kind of in the intro here today. At last count, they have 17 games in this series, 14 of which are originals, and I think 3 are remake, remaster type things. 1990 was when the first game came along. And this is kind of a fun trivia tidbit if you didn't know this. The original game was actually a project by students for a professor, and was never
Really?
meant to be sold commercially, but they made the demo, and the professor really liked it, said it was great, and then they actually sold it, I think, on like their college campus, just
Whoa.
like bootleg copies of it, and it sold well enough that it got picked up, and that's how the series actually got started. So that's kind of cool.
Heck yeah.
What other things we got here? What did you just call this? You called it a RPG. What was the term you just
Strategy
used?
RPG.
Strategy RPG. Okay,
Mhm.
developers officially call it an RPG simulation, but it's got really kind of a unique style to it. Like you said, it's this mostly turn-based strategy, but with elements of leveling up and characters and relationships, and like every entry has a little bit different things
Mhm.
into it. So, but with good stories too, which I think is key to this series. You're
Mhm.
not just fighting over a single battlefield, then you fight over the next battlefield. Like there's stuff going on behind the scenes, and
Mhm.
um, I know you're a fan of the weapon triangle. That came in around the fourth game in the series, it says, which
Mhm.
is it looks from what I was checking on this, very different variations on the rock, paper, scissors formula, essentially, but some have like magic, some have like just your standard handheld weapons, and
Mhm.
some have firearms, and like
Bows
there's,
and yeah.
yeah, so kind of changes a little bit, it seems like, game to game, what they were doing. Another unique thing, or maybe not unique thing, but one of the things the game are known for is permadeath. Now, I will say when I talk about the games here in a little bit, that's probably the first game I can recall that I played that had that. I think you said maybe you played some others.
Yeah, probably the first game of this sort that I ever played that had permadeath was the original XCOM UFO Defense.
Okay.
Because yeah, you send your troops out, you know there's a sizable chance they might not come back alive. And when they're dead, they're dead. There's no bringing them back. So that was, I think, my first exposure to that. But I've always liked that element of games because it makes things a
Hmm.
bit more immediate, a bit more tense. So
Yeah, fully agree. I mean, I'd have to look up. I meant to check to see if I could find a list of like some classic turn-based games. I'm sure I must have played something
mhm.
at some point, but I was more into like RTS type stuff, StarCraft and Warcraft and Age of Empires and things like that.
Okay.
Back around this time period. In those games, you have units, but they're just like nameless drones or peons or whatever. So if you lose one in battle, it's like no big deal. You send out five at a time, they die. It
Mhm.
doesn't really change
You can always
anything.
build more. Yeah.
Right, right. So the idea of like having um named characters who are part of the storyline and them suddenly being gone is interesting.
It is.
Um, we can talk more about that in a bit here, but let's see. Since I didn't realize this went back this far, since the third game in the series of the 14, they already had included the option to turn on casual mode, though, which would keep your heroes alive if they did die in battle. They came back at the end of the battle,
Mhm.
and I didn't realize that was that old of a concept for the series.
Yeah, me
Um,
neither. Because it seems like the most recent ones they kind of made a big to do about adding in casual mode, but
that's what I thought. So
yeah, yeah, huh,
maybe it started in that one and just wasn't in all of them. I don't know on that. I should point
possibly.
out that I do not consider myself an expert in this topic at all.
Same.
um, Hence why we're focused more on the more recent games in this than the older ones. So it wasn't until the seventh game in the series, which was after Smash Brothers Melee came out, that they released a game in both Japan and the United States. So the first six actually were not released here locally, and it's kind of gone on to be I like to call this like a double A franchise for Nintendo because it's not Metroid, it's not Mario, it's not Zelda, but it exists somewhere maybe in the realm of like F-Zero or Star Fox or some of these other ones they have that are, people know the names of them even if they haven't played them.
Mhm.
So but I
Except the
think
new except the new Fire Emblem games are actually being made these days.
this
Rip
is true.
F-Zero.
That's a whole nother podcast, but yes, that's very true.
Mhm.
So I think this one, like you just said, has gone up in public consciousness because the new games are both fairly well received and also, like you said, they're just new entries that are being made. So,
Mhm.
last sales figure I could find was of 2021. There were 18.5 million copies sold of the franchise, which is pretty good. I mean, if you break that down over 17 games, that's really only a little over a million a game. But
That's still respectable.
yeah, and that was 2021. So I would have to think copies of these last three games have probably sold decently well past that statistic as well.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know for sure if these are the best-selling entries on the list, but I would have to think with the Switch's install base, they have to be
I would think
fairly
so.
well. I mean, when you have however many 100 million Switches out there, enough people casually pick it up that it's like they're probably doing okay.
I would think so.
All right. Anything else you want to say about the series before we jump in? You said you had some other stuff out there.
We can get to some of my other points when we get to the most recent game, because it builds off of what you mentioned about how there are still a lot of entries in this that haven't been localized officially.
Mm,
So I'll touch back on that later
okay.
because it does kind of become important.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
Well, we're going to kick this off with Fire Emblem Three Houses, which I apologize I did not get a date for here on that, but maybe what, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, somewhere in there.
Feels like about 3 or 4. Hang on.
I'll find that while Justin looks that up. I can give you some stats on this. It's taken off of Metacritic. It has an 89% on Metacritic, so pretty good. User score 8.8, so very consistent with the reviewers on this one. Did you find a year, Justin?
It came out in 2019.
2019.
So
That sounds about right.
yeah.
So 3 to 4 years,
Mhm.
depending on when that came out during the year.
In July, it says. So coming up on 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 89% Metacritic, 8.8 is the user score on this, and I definitely am not going to try to go through what are both fun and semi-convoluted storylines in these games, but I did just steal the summary off of Metacritic because it was short. So this
Sure.
one, it says war is coming to the continent of Fodlan. Here, orders maintained by the Church of Saros, which hosts the prestigious Officers Academy within its headquarters. You are invited to teach one of its 3 mighty houses, each comprised of students brimming with personality and represented by a royal from one of 3 territories. As a professor, you must lead your students in their academic lives in turn-based tactical RPG battles wrought with strategic new twists to overcome. Which house and which path will you choose? So I can start with this one and just
Sure.
say I don't know that I ever plan to ever play a Fire Emblem game, but I saw something on this one, and I don't know if it's a video or if I read something. I really wish I knew now, but the concept of like having the 3 houses for some reason really appealed to me, and like the idea that who I picked essentially was going to change the whole story to the game. I mean, I'm sure somewhat minorly we could talk about that, but
Mhm.
that had a lot of appeal to me. The fact that you were like a professor in the game, but also like basically the same age as the students. But you were like the mercenary cool kid from outside camp or whatever was kind of interesting to me. And so I was intrigued. I bought this game and well, I won't quite say any more on that yet. But what I know you played this one, so how did you get introduced to this one?
So at this point, I had already known about the series for a while. I had picked up some of the other entries on like the 3DS that had come out. Still kicking myself for never picking up the GameCube one because that one is stupid expensive at this point. But
Oh,
so I had already, been acquainted with the series and knowing that there's an installment coming out that's going to be on actual current gen hardware and not just a dedicated handheld. That appealed to me because I wanted to really see. What's what the developers could do with a slightly more powerful platform rather than just the little 3DS dual screen thing. And the whole like almost Harry Potter-esque academy element of it that always kind of struck me as a little iffy, but it still had my attention and I still picked it up when it came out. That said, I still haven't beaten it, but we can get to that in a bit if there's anything else you wanted to say beforehand.
yeah, well, I just would say you're on the money with the comparison to Harry Potter, which is interesting because that is not a franchise that I even particularly have ever enjoyed, and that's pre all the J.K. Rowling bullshit that's out there now. It was just not a series I ever was super intrigued in. I don't know why, but I never found the characters to be particularly exciting or enlightening or but you're right, there is a lot of comparisons here with like you don't have the sorting hat, but it's like you pick which house you want to choose and which one you're going to help lead. And then um it's interesting how this game is set up from like a I don't want to say choose your own adventure standpoint, but you as the professor have the house of people that are going to be on your team, which is basically like some royal kid, and then I think 8 other kids. I think you get 9 people on your team or
I think
somewhere around
so.
that.
Yeah.
And then there's these like secondary characters who are like other professors and the people of the church and other characters in the game.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting to see, like, as the game progresses on, where those characters end up at. Like, that's kind of interesting. I know you haven't finished the game yet, but it's kind of like, some of those characters end up joining your side. Some
Mhm.
of them may not join your side,
Okay.
but they're like characters you didn't really expect to be on your team.
Mhm.
And that's intriguing to me because I should clarify, I played through this once. I haven't played through the other 2 houses, but I'm intrigued to see like if those other characters join all 3 of the teams when you play them, or is it certain ones that join certain teams, or maybe some characters
Okay.
never join a team. I don't know the answer to that, but that's an intriguing concept to me, like that who actually joins you, will change based on decisions that you make in this. So,
Sure.
should also point out, I don't know how far in the game did you play to? Did you get to the halfway point?
Uh, it's been a while.
Easy way to tell is the first half of this game, all 3 houses are together on campus,
Mhm.
and then the second half of the game is like the 3 houses battling because shit goes down.
Okay, no, I did not get to that point.
Okay. So the first half is like very chummy Harry
Mhm.
Potter-esque, I would say, with threats from external, outside the school. And then the second half is like, all right, now, I mean, if you want to keep that analogy going, you have Hermione's team versus Harry's team versus Ron's team.
Okay.
And then that's kind of more the focus of the second half of the game, but with those other elements from the first half still there as well. So,
Okay.
so you didn't get to the halfway point then.
Yeah, and it's not that it's a bad game. I want to make that 100% clear. It's not that this game is bad. It's it changes a lot from the standard Fire Emblem formula. Not as much as the second game we're going to talk about, I'm sure, but but the first thing is it dumps a lot of stuff onto you all at once. There's the preliminary battle, then all of a sudden you're a teacher and you have to plan your schedule and you have your entire initial roster of people and it's this like all of this that gets dumped on you at once. Where in a standard game this would be kind of parceled out more gradually as you go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like in a lot of them, you start off with a team of like maybe 4 or 5 characters at the beginning, and then you gradually add as you go, and you have a chance to get a feel for everyone, individually, before, instead of having everyone lumped onto you all at once. But starting out in 3 houses, you've got like 30 characters you can get to know, depending
Yeah.
on which house you choose, and you only get a little snippet of each one, and it kind of feels overwhelming in a way. Um, and that has always been a thing that has weighed against it in my opinion. It's not inherently a bad thing having that kind of choice, but I would have preferred a bit more of a lead in before all of a sudden you need to decide which group of students you're going to spend the rest of the game with. You know,
Hmm.
um, there's a couple other issues I had with it too, but we'll get to that when we talk a little more about the gameplay. Unless you wanted me to just dive right in.
Um, yeah, why don't you go ahead? I'll just throw some points out once you go ahead. Go
Okay.
into it. What do you got?
Oh, okay. So before this, you had mentioned the weapon triangle, which to me is iconic to Fire Emblem. And for those of you who haven't played one of these games, that basically the core of it is swords are good against axes, axes are good against lances, lances are good against swords. If you throw someone with a sword up against someone with a lance in most of these games, they're going to have a very bad time of it. They're going to do crap damage and they're going to get hit really hard in response. That's gone from 3 houses. There's a few remnants of it, like bows are still good against flying units, and magic is still good against armored units, but the core of it is just gone. Which to me, that guts a lot of the strategy element, because you don't have to think as much about who you send out onto the field, where you put certain people. Is this X user going to be safe here when there's like a sword guy who's just within range if he doesn't kill the guy he's fighting right now? That depth is kind of gone. They did try to shore it up with the is it battalions or brigades or whatever that you can attach
Yeah,
to
one
units?
of the 2 battalions, I think maybe.
Yeah, where those are like kind of background armies, for lack of a better term, that can
Hmm.
attach to your individual commander units, and they add different buffs and they have certain abilities. So they tried to diversify it a bit, but it's kind of like if you took Mario Kart and you just removed all the items, you'd still have a competent racer, but the heart of the game is gone. And that's a big part of why I never went through and finished this one, because the 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 core of the strategy is just not there. And I've played other games like this where that wasn't an element. Like my first introduction to this genre was Shining Force back on the Sega Genesis, and that didn't have the weapon triangle or anything like it. And it was still a fun game, but that's Shining Force, and this is Fire Emblem. And if I'm playing a Fire Emblem game, I expect that part to be there, and it wasn't. And that I really feel that absence.
Okay. That's
So
a fair comparison. I know I've heard you talk about the weapon triangle before.
mhm.
Um, it, having not played a lot of these games, I will say one of the things that was appealing to me about how this plays out is, and I gather this is not new to this game and probably not new to other games like this as well, but I really enjoyed how you had like the battlefield aspect of the game and then you had the like story behind the scenes aspect of the game. And
Mhm.
I do hear what you're saying with regards to like, when you're at I forget where you're at the church, I think in the beginning of this game,
Mhm.
running around, and you're right. There's like so many characters you can talk to and so many options of even something as simple as like, you found a bow on the ground, like not a shooting bow, like a hair bow, a hair
Mhm.
ribbon. And you're like, who do I give the hair ribbon to? Well, there's 30 characters here and could
I
be
have
any
to
of
run
them.
around the
And
entire campus to try and
who's
find who it
got
belongs to.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So there is a little overwhelmingness to this. I think you're probably right there. I really enjoyed the like, I will say, well, semi spoiler, but not spoiler. I enjoyed this game for both sides of the coin, is what I'm getting at here. The behind the scenes stuff I really liked. I liked it wasn't really in depth, but I thought it was interesting how they at least made an effort for you to like be the teacher of one of these
Mhm.
schools, and like you could pick that this student or character was going to specialize in wielding an axe or gauntlets or whatever and have their training be specific to that, or you could bring in a guest lecturer on magic because you had a couple magic users on your team. And it's all minor, and if you want to really be reductionist here, it all comes down to just like behind the scene numbers that you're playing around with, like this person's relationship with this person's now a 12 instead of a 9, and their ability in this category is 23 instead of 17. But
Mhm.
it was interesting in just that it made you feel like you actually were choosing stuff that affected the characters. And I'm probably semi-biased because I teach for a living, but I was worried about this aspect because I was like, oh great, now I get to be like Justin Plate's banking the game, yay. But I really enjoyed that part of it, which I didn't know that I was going to. So that was cool. The relationships are a lot in this game. We should
Mhm.
also mention while I'm on that topic, like you kind of can also forge which characters become better friends with other characters and increase their stats when they're fighting together and things of that nature. So that was kind of cool.
Mhm.
The combat for me, that other half of this coin, I think really I hadn't played a game in Fire Emblem before this, so I didn't notice the lack of the weapon triangle because I wasn't used to having that. So I probably have a different view than you do on that aspect of this. But I still thought it was definitely strategic as far as especially when you got like the bigger, well, it didn't have to be a bigger battlefield, but like one where there were more options for shit to go wrong, either due to its size or like due to choke points that you kind of had to send people down,
Mhm.
making sure you had the right person to handle whatever was going to come out down that path was kind of important. And then kind of like what you're saying with like, I know you were saying it from the weapon triangle aspect, but like you have to gamble a little bit. Like, can this character of mine kill this one enemy before this other enemy gets to me? And um,
Mhm.
how far people could move is all a factor on the map as well, because you don't want to have, like the slow person in the back of your army too much because they may never make it to the action before they're needed. And then that battle's over with, or your
Mhm.
character's dead or whatever. Um, and I think it must have been you I talked to, or maybe somebody else in the chat that we keep, but I started playing it right away with the permadeath because That was also really appealing to me because, like you just said, like it really made those characters seem important. And when they were gone, they were gone. This
Mhm.
one in particular, I think when you did you lose any characters in your play?
Of Three Houses.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm trying to remember because again, it had been a while ago. But I know I lost just and it was through just bad luck.
Okay.
Where hits aren't guaranteed in these games. There's like a percentage chance that your characters will connect, and that a percentage chance that they'll do crits and that sort of thing.
Uh,
I remember I lost one.
which house did you play as? We didn't even say that.
Oh, back then I think I played as the Blue Lions.
Okay.
So it was kind of the taciturn. Uh, he was the swordsman. He was very like reserved, very taciturn. And but he was good on the battlefield. And I
Okay.
sent him up against some unit that I was like, oh, he's got like an 80% chance to hit. This will work. Miss. And in the counterattack, it was not only did he get hit, but he got critted and killed. So that's the one that stands out in my head because I liked
Okay.
him. I wanted to know more about him, and then it's just like dead. So
Trying to
that can
remember.
happen in these games.
Yeah,
You can have an entire storyline or side story gone if someone dies, and that is kind of interesting to me.
for sure. It gives it stakes. And this one when the because I lost a character fairly early on. I played as the Black Eagles in my game, and I lost their Lance horseback rider essentially early in the game. Which
Okay.
he was not one of my favorite characters at that point, so I wasn't heartbroken that he was gone. But in this game, in three houses, when the character died on the battlefield, they still showed up. I think for like the team meetings and stuff back at the school, which is not the case in the next game I will talk about. So that changes. Okay, what else do we have here on this one? So the permadeath, I really enjoyed that. There is an ability which does, I don't know. It kind of feels cheap, but it kind of doesn't at the same time. They have an ability in this game, and I forget what the exact word of it is or what the name of it is, but it lets you like rewind time essentially, and you could gain more of those as you progress through the story. But essentially, it was nice because it wasn't so strong that like it negated you just being a terrible player or making a dumb decision. But I liked it because there were times, especially later in the game where I had two characters all alone off to one side of the battlefield, and suddenly this giant monster appears because you defeated the army, and they happen to show up next to those two characters all by themselves, and you're like, well, son of a bitch.
I've
So
been there.
maybe that's cheap, but I thought it was a way to balance just the bad luck, basically.
Yeah, and that mechanic does actually come back in one of the other games we're going to be talking about here too. So I think I do want to say Three Houses is the first game I know of where it was introduced. It may
Okay.
have also happened in one of the other games that I'm not as familiar with, but yeah, it's a newer addition to the series, definitely.
Okay. I could see if you were like a purist how that would be pretty controversial to you.
Yeah,
Um,
but then again, if you're playing after a long day at work and you make just like a stupid move, like without realizing, oh, there's an archer here, just within range of where I moved my Pegasus Knight, they're gonna die. So being able to like erase that and rethink it is a nice thing. Just because if you just aren't paying as close attention, you're not punished for it. But if it's just bad luck, then that's a different story.
yeah,
So
I agree. I mean, there were even I kind of wish every game had that ability, but I don't know how you would implement it in every type of game. But even in like Dredge, which we'll talk about in a future podcast here, but there were probably 10 times I finally got like this fish I needed and I accidentally either sold it or threw it overboard because I clicked the wrong button.
or you got attacked by something and your hull
Yeah.
was damaged in that spot. Yep, yep,
And you're like, well, there goes that. You gotta restart that.
yep. Anyway,
Yeah. Other things on this one, I guess I would say some other positives here. I've been kind of hitting some of them as we've been going through, but I really do. It's a game that I played through just the one time with the house that I chose, but it's a game that I would instantly want to play again. I haven't gotten back to it yet because I have so many games right now, but this is a game I will go back and play just because I want to see the other storylines and what happens with them. Now, that being said, the problem, if you call it a problem, is by the time this game is over, you are essentially so attached to the characters in this game from your team that I don't really want to play as the other characters in the other houses now. And I know I
Uh,
should because I would get a chance to attach to them as well, but it's like these are my peoples now, so I don't want to play as somebody else now. I played, like I said, as the Black Eagles. My son started a game as the Blue Lions, and he didn't get very far in his. And my daughter played as the Golden Deer,
hmm,
and she got much further. I don't think she finished it, but she got much further. But she still loves to go and walk around the village and talk to people and do missions and stuff and
sure.
um, all those things. Other quibbles I have about this
Mhm.
is it's not a short game from start to finish. So when I say like I'll go back and try the other two, it's not like it's a 10-hour game that I'm going back to like try the other two houses. Like you'd have to really invest some time to play all three quests in this to see what those storylines are like.
Mhm.
And another little quibble I have is just I did love all the stuff mostly in the church and other locations between the battlefields, but there were sometimes like it was like do battle, teach the classes, which I liked, do the actions, which I liked, and then there were a lot of like kind of mundane fetch quests you had to do where it was like get this item and take it to here, go find this person. Some of that
Yeah.
I could have did without that. And then this is just a general comment I have for almost every adventure RPG tactical strategy type game is like you mentioned the battalions.
Yeah.
And I just feel like all of these types of games, or even close to the types of games, have extra systems going on behind the scenes that I don't fully understand by the end of the game, even. Um,
I kind of understood how the battalions worked. Like, just having them equipped would change your stats a little bit, and they all had individual abilities, but I agree. It's a lot to keep track of.
yeah, but it's really my quibbles. You got any positives or negatives about this one we didn't chat on yet?
I mean, I do have to applaud them for trying something new with the whole academy setting, and it did add a different character to the whole game from what I'm used to in a Fire Emblem game. Unfortunately for me, that was offset by the lack of the weapon triangle, but I do see the appeal of having a more centered base, a more grounded storyline in between the fights, where you can spend your time kind of as you see fit, and have a bit more stuff to do rather than just uh you know a couple of things off a checklist and then get ready for the next battle. So
Yeah.
I can appreciate that. It just wasn't what I was looking for at the time, I guess.
Okay.
And one of these days, I will go back and finish this because I've enjoyed it when I've sat down and played it. But for whatever reason, every single time after I get a certain ways in, it just I'll drift off and focus on something else, and I just never get back to it. I don't know why. Um, but I do understand why people like this game. I do understand why people thought it was a breath of fresh air, and despite the quibbles I have with it, I think it is a quality product. It's just different in ways I don't always like.
Okay.
So
You mentioned the Blue Lions. You made some insinuation there. Is your current playthrough that same team then, or are you playing a different team on your current playthrough?
I current playthrough is a bit of
Yeah,
a stretch, but
the one you left off.
the one I left off, I think I had decided to try the Golden Deer
Okay.
just to try something different because it had been so long since I had started it the first time.
It's Claude's
So
charisma. It's okay. Just say it. It's his
he is a
charisma.
charming son of a bitch. I can't
Isn't
deny
he
it.
though? Isn't he
But
though?
yeah,
And you said you do not feel comfortable putting a number on this.
just because I like you said, I haven't gotten to the halfway point where the big
Yeah.
shakeup happens.
You didn't see the big reveal yet. Oh no.
Yeah, I got to a point where there was like a small duke or count or something who was rebelling, despite the fact that the odds were stacked against him or something. We had to go and quell that, and I got a little further than that, and I don't quite remember exactly where I left off, but I know I didn't get to the big reveal.
I mean,
So,
it is interesting because it starts as Harry Potter, but the second half of the game is almost more like Game of Thrones,
hmm,
with regards to like, map control and these royal families and so and everybody has a title and
hmm,
um that's an
okay,
interesting comparison. I just thinking about that. And in Game of Thrones too is like, well, there's a little bit of this isn't spoilery, I don't think, for your game, but there's a little bit of, who's the real villain here,
okay,
which is interesting because I know my daughter absolutely hates my team, thinks they're the devil.
Oh,
And
jeez.
of course, like when I played through, like her team was like a side point to my story, but so it's just interesting. That's why I said I would like to see all of the stories on this.
Sure.
Um, well, I'm going to put a number on this one because this was the kind of a game that really did put this series on my radar, if nothing else. And the characters from my team in particular, I don't think it's an exaggeration when I'm saying that, if I had to make a list of my 50 most memorable video gaming characters, I bet there would be at least 5 to 8 of the people from this game on my list. And one
Whoa.
thing we didn't mention also is the voice acting in this game is incredible. And
Good point.
it's, if you haven't played this game, audience, and you're thinking like you can cook a meal for 2 people on your team and sit down at the table with them. That's maybe not so canned
Crucial.
conversation that they have, you know what I mean? But they have these what are the support conversations. So like they have actually mapped out and recorded basically all 30 of these characters, 40 of these characters. If they interact with this other person from the 40, that's a dialogue in a scene. And then if they later have a strength into that relationship, that's another dialogue in a scene. And you can recruit people from other teams. We didn't mention that either in this
Oh,
game.
yes.
So if you have a really good relationship and are showering somebody with presents on one of the other houses, or a professor, I believe too, you can sway them to your side with that also. So that's kind of cool. And so like just the sheer amount of mathematical voice acting that they've done for this game is super impressive.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and that sort of thing isn't cheap either, especially if you're doing it in both Japanese and English. That's an investment.
yeah.
So yeah, that shows an attention to quality that they cared about this, and yeah, that deserves respect.
Did you say Japanese and English?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that all that's voiced in Japanese too.
Japanese and English, did you say?
Uh,
Oh, don't mind
oh
me.
man.
Just sitting here with my Edelgard PVC figure that I imported from Japan from my
Hey,
pop-up parade company here.
wait. That's not a Funko.
That's
What's
not a
happening?
Funko. That's how much I enjoyed this character in this game.
Damn.
I have one of these for my team that I just got,
Nice.
and my daughter has Claude and Lysithia from her team.
That's awesome.
They only have 6 of these out at the moment, but I had to get these imported from Japan
Huh.
a while back here. So they were not cheap. They were like 30 to 40 bucks a pop, but
Oh, for figurines like that, trust me, you could go much
oh, for
further
sure.
north.
I
Yeah,
mean, they're
yeah.
not, they're just plastic essentially. They're PVC, but it's
Mhm.
yeah, so okay, my rating for this is going to shock you,
Okay.
but not shock you at the same time. But it might
All right.
shock you because I
My
don't
body
know
is
if
ready.
I don't know for sure if I've ever given out a 10, but this is a 10 in my book.
Whoa.
When I remake my list of my favorite games of all time, I expect this is going to be somewhere near the top 5. Super, super love this game. Super, super love the characters, and has changed like a huge chunk of my video gaming because I love this cast of characters so much.
Wow.
So yeah, this is a solid 10 for me.
I'll be damned. Okay, yeah, with praise like that, I will have to get back to this at some point.
I do want to play the other 2 houses, but like I said, I don't know if I could fight against my own characters, so it's kind of a weird thing. And I know I can't recruit all of them. I might be able to get 1 or 2 over there, but
Oof.
yeah, it's interesting. I
Mhm.
stuttering, but if you ever get through the rest of your playthrough, I'd be curious for you to
Mhm.
tell me how your game ends.
Sure, yeah.
Um, because like I said, my daughter was heading down one path where it basically seemed like some of the characters I love were going to be a big problem for her, and in my playthrough, it was a totally different set of characters. So I'm intrigued if the ending's
Oh,
even the same or how that works out. But
interesting.
yeah,
Huh.
so
I'll have to give that a go and see.
all right, now on to something entirely different. Our second game of our trilogy tonight is Fire Emblem Three Hopes, which is, branding is a little confusing on this one because it's not 3 houses, it's 3 hopes.
Mhm.
But that's because they're reusing the same characters, same cast of characters, which I gather all the Fire Emblems have some overlap with characters, but some of their own casts as well.
Sort of, yeah. It gets weird at times.
So this one Justin hasn't played,
Yes,
so we
but
should. So I will not spend as long as we did on the first one, perhaps. But this is well, let me give you the quick stats here on this one. So this one has an 80 Metacritic, so a little lower than the first one. And the first one had an 8.8 user score. This one actually has an 8.9 user score. So players actually prefer this one ever so slightly to the other one, which I find really interesting.
yeah.
We'll talk
So
about
I
engage stuff here later on, but yeah, go ahead.
Since I haven't played, I'm going to try to jump in where I can,
Yeah.
where it seems pertinent. So I guess my first question about this one is, since it does revolve around the same cast, does it follow the same story or is it different?
Great question. So, here's what's interesting. When they came out with a new game announced with that same cast, which I just mentioned, fantastic game, love it, love the characters. I was like, pick up. This is an automatic buy for me. I didn't exactly know what it was going to be. I assume kind of new story with the same characters. So this is the only game I have ever played that I'm going to call a full remix of the first game. So you have all the same characters. Now, this one I will say adds in, if you can believe it, actually adds in a lot of new characters on top of the entire
Really?
cast from the first game. The
Huh.
houses are the same. You start with the same people in the houses, but there are a lot of ancillary characters that are both playable and as part of the story in this one.
Interesting.
Especially like, if you had a random character in the last game that was like, oh, my father, blah, 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 when they were talking, like, well, his dad's going to be in this game. Like they have everybody in this game from the whole royal families all around. But I say remix, and here's why. So the first thing that happens in this game that's really intriguing, you start as a new character. So we should mention in the old game, you basically named your hero and played as either a boy or a girl.
Mhm.
I think what is a Byleth? That was the actual character's name.
Yes.
Okay, so this one I named my own name in the game, but this game when you start off, the first thing you find out very quickly is Byleth is the antagonist in this game. They are
Ooh.
essentially the final boss ish of this game.
Huh.
And so that's really bizarre to start with. You play as a new character in this one with, I think, blue hair, but forgive me again, color blindness. It's blue or purple, but I think it's blue.
Okay.
And I again don't even remember what their actual name is in this game, because I renamed the characters both times I played it. But it was so surreal to see your character as now controlled by the computer and like one of the ultimate big bads in this version.
Interesting.
Yeah, you still start with like the three houses, but it's not really like the other one per se, where you're like buddy buddy the first half of the game and then you fight. It's more or less like your team has like this agenda for the game that you're attempting to accomplish, and it was more or less like I think the gold team wanted to like give everybody unite the land, but everybody has like democracy more or less, or we can pick who we want to be in charge. And like the black
Mhm.
team more or less was like, I'm the queen and I'm gonna rule everything, but I'm gonna conquer everybody so that everybody has equality once we're all united together. And then the blue team was more like, we're gonna conquer everybody, but it's more for religious reasons, and we're going to try to like make a theocracy
Theocracy.
more or less
Okay.
as we're going through. So I didn't even mention. Here's the quick summary of this. It says, join Fire Emblem Three Houses characters as you engage in massive battles across Fodlan, with Edelgard, Dimitri, Claude, and other Fire Emblem Three Houses characters returning to put their combat expertise on display as you revisit a war-torn Fodlan. Unleash devastating combos and striking special moves and action-packed real-time combat. Cut through hordes of enemies and characters from the Fire Emblem Three Houses game. Take down dozens of foes with Edelgard's axe, Dimitri's lance, or blast enemies from a distance with Claude's bow. Slash, swing, and spear your way to a brighter future for Fodlan. Yeah, so biggest thing with this one, I should say, obviously, gameplay wise, if you didn't catch that in there, is this is a real-time game. It's is it Muso? I always forget how you say this
Yep.
word.
That's
So
the general term for it. Yeah.
it's interesting. I used to call this like Dynasty Warriors, is what I used to say. Like this is a Dynasty Warrior style game, and now Nintendo has made Fire Emblem Warriors, Fire Emblem Three Hopes. There's Zelda Age of Calamity. There's Zelda Hyrule Warriors. Like they've put out so many games made by the Dynasty Warrior people companies that like I don't even necessarily call them Dynasty Warrior games anymore because now there's so many offshoots of them.
Yeah, yeah. Muso is the kind of catch-all term, and as interesting as the story that you mentioned sounds, for me, it's the gameplay is the reason I would never play this because
Mm,
I hate these style of games.
okay.
Because a part of it is just because they're kind of repetitive. Because you're on a battlefield, you control one primary character, and there's just like hundreds and hundreds of mooks that they provide no challenge, no real threat. You just mow through them until you get to like a general or a lieutenant or whatever, someone who actually is a threat.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's just mashing A or whatever button it happens to be in this case until you get to something that's actually a challenge. And part of my distaste for these is one of my exes long ago was obsessed with Dynasty Warriors.
Okay.
I don't know why. And at any time she wanted to play something, it was that. And I got just so fed up with that formula
Mm.
that I look at it and anything in that kind of setup, that Muso setup, and I have an just instinctual visceral reaction against it. It's just I can't see myself going back and playing one of these just because they're so repetitive and so dull to me.
Yeah, I could see how this type of game is not everybody's cup of tea. This was that style of game growing up. I didn't have any games like that, especially as Nintendo and Dynasty Warriors was not on Nintendo. But we had a friend that had, I don't know which Dynasty Warriors game, but we didn't hang out with this friend very often. But Brett and I can remember went over there a few times and we're like in the basement where they had all the video game stuff. And we are like, what's this game? Because he hadn't played it either. And so we were kind of like, this game's pretty cool. Like, we hadn't played a game like that. So we played that a few times there, but not really many times until Zelda Hyrule Warriors came on. I think I sank like 150 hours into that game or something ridiculous, trying to do all the challenges and power ups and collect pieces of the Zelda map and all these other things.
Oh,
Um, so this one, I mean, with that same cast, I was going to play this no matter what. I play pretty much. I mean, if they made a pie factory with those characters at this point, I would probably buy the game and just make pies with Petra and swoon over her anyway. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. You're definitely right with all you said with regards to like basically, smashing a button and trying to kill a million minions. And if you're a fan of the series Fire Emblem, you have to really suspend belief to play this. Because now suddenly, your sword attack can kill 10 people at once, whereas the other game you were like, it's going to take multiple turns to kill this guy with my sword. And you do a
yep.
magic mega attack kills like 1,000 people or whatever. So if you haven't played the style of game, it's entirely different. So you have to be aware of that ahead of time. Justin, I think I mentioned this to you before in some other conversation, but the combat triangle is back for this one. So that's a small thing for you here, I know.
I'm not sure how that would work in this style of game.
Well, I tell you, so just to go back a second here with this, in each mission you do, you play as 4 characters from your team. Okay. And there is a fair amount of strategy juggling where those 4 are at and what they're doing on the battlefield. But if you send off one of your characters, whatever ones you're not playing are controlled by the computer. So they'll do whatever objective you're ordering them to do. But if, say you send in a sword guy and he gets stuck on the other side of the map where there's a bunch of people that have strength against him, then you better switch back to that character pretty quick because permadeath exists in this one as well. So
okay.
And I lost way more people in this one than I did in Three Houses. I think I lost 3 or 4 people on my team in this one, and it sucked because I lost like a couple of my real favorite characters in the game. I think I even mentioned I lost one because I answered the door.
Yeah, I think so.
Somebody rang the door for my son, and I went. My character was almost dead. They had a healing item, and I went to answer the door and came back and unpaused the game, and they instantly died. And I was like, "Oh shit, they had no energy." That's right, and that was it. And I played fair. I didn't like jack the system off, and like I was like, they died. So it sucked, rough. But there it was. So there is a little bit of that, but just like knowing which characters are good against which enemies on the battlefield was really fun because your map overview for the battle would be like showing you usually some of the battlefield, and it might be like there's stronger guys here that are lancers and stronger guys here that are, so you have to kind of like send your people in different directions.
Okay.
Some missions you get additional NPCs from your team as well. Like I think I played a couple towards the end of the game that there was like, I don't even know, 8 or a dozen of people on my team out there on the battlefield at once, like running around doing stuff. And you can still order those other people. You just can't play as those other people.
Huh.
So it got kind of chaotic. In time is definitely a different type of stress and strategy in this type of game with like each mission you do, and Dynasty Warriors may have had this too, but the Zelda games I like this have it as well, where there's usually 3 goals in each mission, and one is like clear it in this amount of time, kill this many characters while you're there, and don't take this much damage. Essentially, are usually the 3 with some small variations.
Okay.
So there's a little like I always try to S rank all those as I play, but there'd be some that were like, there's a thief on the battlefield and you're like protecting this diplomat that's running across with 2 characters while somebody's fighting a dragon at the top of the screen. And you're like, oh, I really want that key that the thief has. So you'd have to send somebody down to get him. Usually you'd take control of that character just to make sure it happened as efficiently as possible.
Okay.
But then it's like, you got the key and then where's the treasure chest? It's across the map. I need to go
Of
get
course.
that, but like I only have 30 seconds left before I run out of S rank time on this. So it's really you're not doing a lot fighting wise, but it is very stressful. I can't, I don't know if you had that experience with the Dynasty Warriors. It's a different kind of stress, but I really like this kind of stress.
Sure.
I guess I have found.
I can
So
appreciate that. It's just not my cup of tea.
yeah, the difference I guess is, I mean, you feel like a general in the last game with the units and this game, but this one is very different because it's all happening at once. So
Okay.
they throw enough scenarios into each different stage that each stage at least feels different. And like I said, with I would guess they probably add 50 new characters into the game is my guess. I mean,
Jeez.
and sometimes you fight them, sometimes they're on your team. Like it's this little, like it's really fun. Like I said, 'cause it's like a remix of the storyline from the first game. I played the Black Eagles again because you get to pick which team you play again in this one. So that was really interesting also, but it was, if you're not gonna play this one, I can kind of talk about it a little bit, but it was interesting in mine because maybe like halfway through the game, like the 3 sides had just been fighting and destroying Fodlan for so long that eventually like Edelgard brokers peace with Claude, in my story at least, and like they together were like, let's take out the church because they stand for like not letting people have individual freedom, so let's take them out and the blue team out. And so it starts that way, and then of course I'm like, this is going to not end well because he's going to turn on me, and then eventually he does turn on me, and it's this whole thing. But there was always something going on. It was really fun. It still had the in between battles, you still had the camp with all the relationship stuff and the training stuff and the chores and the cooking, and you actually level up the camp in this one. You level up each of the stations in the camp, the fighting grounds and the kitchen, and like, so you're collecting materials and trying to upgrade each of which came with like new benefits you could do and strategy points, and you have side missions that you could tackle and like random events on the map that would pop up, some of which were timed, not like the fighting map, but like the world map would pop up. So you had, a lot of different things you were always checking there. Let's see what else. I don't know. It's kind of stupid fun, but it was fun, and it was, like I said, it was just really interesting to see all the characters from that first game and the plot from that first game just kind of like thrown in a blender and twisted up, and they're like, here's this new game, and you're like, that's not what happens in the old one. But like it was really interesting. It really was interesting just to like see, because the character you play as in Three Houses is like this super powered bad dude in this game, which is probably essentially where you would have been at the end of the first game. So but there's more like shadows in the dark, shall we say, of like mysterious forces at work in this one. And but anyway, yeah, I don't need to go too long on this one, but it is fun. You're right, there's some sameness to it, and so I'm gonna throw a quick number on this one, I'll probably give it like an 8 out of 10. It was fun, not as good as the first one, but definitely was still enjoyable and fun to go back and see those characters again. And
Sure.
even with like the voice acting and the art, we should mention the first game is kind of beautiful too. And
Oh,
the
yes.
cutscenes, I mean, it looks like you're reading a graphic novel or something.
Mhm.
Same thing here, and they added all new voice acting, and then again, like these, not the 50 new characters, but if there was a new character that was in the plot, like I had 7 people on my team that weren't even in the first game by the end of this one.
Wow.
So one really cool thing I should say in this game is you can earn strategy points in each of the stages. So as you go through the world map and do different things, you can get what they call strategy points.
Okay.
And then when you get to the final battle of that stage, essentially, you can choose how you want to use your strategy points. And that was really a really cool thing too, because you could say if I had 50, I could spend 20 on having archers on the walls for the final battle, or I could spend 10 to like have a boulder run through the middle of the battlefield and break this door down, which would let me get into this keep quicker than I could have otherwise. And I spent a lot of mine on recruitment. There'd be sometimes you'd find an enemy general and you could spend 20 to try to persuade them to your side. And
Huh.
that's how you gained characters in this game. It wasn't by meeting them at the academy.
Okay.
And that was really hard too, because you had to like beat them up so that they saw their side was losing, so their energy was really low, and then you had to have the right strategy points to have that as an option. And then additionally, sometimes you even had to have like a certain character that was like the one to recruit them onto your team. So there were sometimes I spent my strategy points and got nothing for it because I ended up just having to kill the person, but I did gain, like I said, 5 or 6 people from the other team, so it was pretty cool. But anyway,
Huh.
all that to say, it was a pretty fun game. 8 out of 10.
Okay.
All right.
All
And we're
right.
going to kick it over to Justin for our third of the trilogy here.
Yeah, this is a bit of a weird episode because we're covering a series where each of us has not played one of the games that we're talking about. So I have played Fire Emblem Engage, the most recent one that came out, and Cody has not.
Yeah.
So any questions you have, feel free to launch in. But this is a much more traditional Fire Emblem setup,
Okay.
where the whole academy thing from Three Houses is gone. It's a much more straightforward story focused mainly on the combat. There's stuff in between. There is still relationship building and stuff like that, but there's no lesson planning or really fetch quests or anything like that. There are occasional side quests that pop up on the map that you can go and do, and sometimes you'll get a new character. Sometimes you'll get like new items or strengthen a bond with one of your emblems, and I'll get to those in a second.
Okay.
But it is much more true to form to the original formula. The basic plot of it is you are the descendant of the divine dragon. The divine dragon is this sort of quasi deity that has kept peace in the land for millennia, and you're her only offspring. You can be male or female, whatever you prefer. You can, and each character model is different.
That's one thing we should say that this series does well, at least in the recent games. I don't know if it's like that the whole way back, but they always give you the option to play male or female, which is nice.
I think that dates back to Fire Emblem Awakening, I want to say, is the first game that
Okay.
did that. That was one of the 3DS ones. So uh, so yeah, basically you're the offspring of the divine dragon. You've woken up after 1,000 years of slumber, and the world has kind of gone to shit. You're at the beginning of the game. Your mother is still alive. She kind of guides you for the beginning bits. I'm not going to say exactly what happens to her, but
She
after a
dies.
certain
You can just say it. She dies.
yeah, she dies.
She's a parent in a video
Um,
game. Of course she dies.
yeah, Disney
Disney
presents
and
Fire
Disney and
Emblem.
video games. That's all that happens. All right.
Yeah. So that which leads you to try and stop the return of this other dragon, the Shadow Dragon, which is another
Ooh.
common element in the Fire Emblem series. And to do that, you have to gather these 12 rings, which hold the souls of heroes from other worlds, and those other worlds are other games. They're called emblems, and so you'll see Marth, you'll see Lucina rather. You'll see characters from games that haven't been localized yet. And this gets back to what I mentioned at the beginning, where those first 6 games, for the most part, haven't gotten official translations into English.
Okay.
So you're not going to know who some of these characters are unless you've sailed the high seas to acquire fan translations of the earlier games in the series. Um, but so the story has you going around the world to the various countries, kingdoms, and basically either bartering with or fighting the rulers to try and get them to give them your rings so that you can have them all together to defeat the Shadow Dragon. It's kind of the basic plot of the game. Um, so it's very much a hopping from place to place to place, fighting against the forces of evil that are rising, and trying to get the MacGuffins to stop the end of the world. Is
Okay.
kind of what it boils down to. It's a very large cast of characters, but unlike Three Houses, you meet them as you go. It's not like just, oh, here they all are at once, pick which ones you like. So you start off with just kind of your retainers and a couple of other friendly units who are from the region where you begin. And as you travel, you gradually acquire more and more people to join your cause. Now, granted, you can usually only have like 8 to 12 of them on the field at one time. So a lot of them are going to be in reserve or, not used terribly often, which can be a little tricky if you want to try to keep a balanced party. There are side missions you can go on that pop up where you can just gain experience and level up characters you don't use much, but that requires grinding. And depending on how much you enjoy the combat, you might or might not want to do those. And there is always the risk of permadeath if you have that option turned on. So there's always that question, do I want to risk losing this character that I kind of like in a mission that doesn't even matter in the story? So there's all these trade-offs going on. But it's a very colorful game, very bright, the art style is very eye-catching.
Okay.
So yeah, I do have to give a nod to that because there's a lot of distinction in the various character designs and things like that. In terms of their personalities, some are certainly better than others, because you've got everyone from the retainer who has been in love with you ever since she was looking after you while you've been asleep, and she does a very, very poor job of hiding it, and that's kind of like her only character trait. Then you've got like later on there's a character who's basically a berserker, and when I first met her, I'm like, okay, she's just going to be completely off the rails, just full of rage and all that. And then if you actually go down her conversation path, you realize that, oh no, she actually has a backstory that is not at all what I expected.
Oh,
And she
okay.
became one of my favorite characters because it's like I just expected her to be a brainless barbarian pretty much, but no, she has this whole like long involved thing where she ran away from her family, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but there's a lot of depth to some of them, others not so much. And there's
Hmm.
some that are just kind of painful. You'll know that all I'm going to say is singing. You'll know the character I'm talking about when you run into them,
Okay.
and maybe it sounds better in Japanese. I get the impression her singing is supposed to sound terrible, but in English it is just it's nails on a chalkboard in hell. So that's
Somebody
all I'm going
mistakenly
to say.
translated it to peaches, 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 peaches.
Replace peaches with meat, and you're not that far off.
God.
It's
Okay.
it's a sight to behold, or to listen to, I should say.
I mean, you just sold me on the game now.
But it is fun. It has, like I said, the weapon triangle is back, so there's a lot of strategy involved. The various rings that you collect, they do give different abilities to the people who have them equipped. And depending on who you give them to, that can change your strategy a bit there too. And yeah, it's if you like Fire Emblem, you'll probably like this.
So do you talk to, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Sure.
trying to wrap my head around this. So you're a character in this game, you have other characters that you're going to meet in the game.
Yes.
Um, are the emblems, which I gather, and I don't know the game, but again, are the
Mhm.
emblems essentially like famous characters from past series?
Yep.
Are you also interacting with them, or they're just like an
Uh, th
item?
no, they're both. So
Oh,
you
okay.
equip them, but they also like if you've seen JoJo's Bizarre Adventure or if you played a Persona game, they're like a Persona or like a stand.
Okay.
So they are there. They follow around the person who has them equipped. They talk, they interact a bit, but they pretty much dwell in the ring.
I see.
And
Okay.
the whole engage title is basically when you uh there's like a meter that builds up as you fight. And if you decide to activate the ring special ability called engage mode, then you kind of like not quite fuse with your emblem, but you gain more of their abilities, and that like kind of supercharges your character for a bit, or whoever has them equipped, and that can let them do special things like warp across the battlefield, or
Oh
just use
wow,
really
okay.
powerful spells, or but again, it's time sensitive because you have to build up that meter, and it only lasts for a certain number of turns, and so there's a lot of little subsystems here, some of which don't entirely make sense all the time. Like there's this whole thing where you can polish the rings, and I guess that determines how useful they are or something. But I just always kept them as polished as possible. There's not like a certain amount of polish points you have to distribute. You can just like keep doing it until they're clean. I don't know why you would ever not do it. Um,
That
but
seems like
there's
a
that.
weird system then.
It is, but it's there. I guess it's important. Question mark. There's also when you go between battles, between you can sleep to change the like the time of day that is going on in your base of operations, and that can affect a few things like fishing. Like different fish come out at different times. But other than that, the only other thing that this seems to do is you'll get woken up sometimes by certain members of your party, and I think that it deepens your relationship stats with them a little bit, but it's random as to whoever does it. So it's just sort of there. And it's a little creepy when you see like this old bearded guy just being like, Divine Dragon, it's time to wake up. And it's just like your eyes open. It's just like, ah. So there's a few systems like that are just kind of odd to me, but the cooking is there, fishing is there. You can like do little side activities with some of the characters to deepen your bonds or to deepen their bonds with other characters, and so when they fight next to each other, they're more effective, that sort of thing. So that's all still there. It's just streamlined a bit.
So you still have a like a team that you're playing on, or a party, or how
Uh,
does that work?
Well, I as far as I know, as long as you in the main story, you'll always get the same characters that you'll run into and that will join you.
Okay.
There are side quests that pop up on the map where if you do those, you'll get certain characters to join you that way. Like I
Oh, okay.
had Anna, the merchant character, who's kind of a mainstay of the series. You meet
Yeah.
her through a side quest, and a few others. And then there are occasional ones on the battlefield where they'll start out as like sort of neutral units, and if you send your primary character over there to talk to them, you can ask them to join you. So there's a few time sensitive things like that. But for the most part, the core characters are always going to be the same.
Okay.
So, and like I said, there's a good range of them. You got everything from your standard like swordsmen and archers to monks to wyvern riders to
Hmm.
there's just a ton of variety out there. And a bunch of like specialty subclasses that specialize in very certain things or that give extra range to their attacks, or there's a lot to tinker with. So but yeah, it's a very, I don't want to say bog standard Fire Emblem experience, but it is more true to form.
Okay.
And if you like that crunchy, strategy combat, then you'll probably enjoy it. One, this is a very small thing, but I really liked it. So after battle, you'll have a chance to kind of walk around the battlefield and talk to your party members and some other NPCs, just to get certain rewards or to catch up with them a bit, and you'll be doing that on the actual battlefield itself, which is cool. So if
Oh,
there's a house that got destroyed during the
yeah.
fight, that house will show up as being destroyed on the map that you're running around in. And I thought that was a very nice touch
Oh,
that
that's
added
cool.
yeah, it added a layer of believability to the world. It's like, oh, I actually am having an impact on things. So
That was a tiny little quibble I had with Three Hopes is that when you're done and when the mission is done on the battlefield,
mhm.
they gave you like it didn't really make sense. They gave you like 10 seconds probably to continue to walk around the battlefield. You
Mhm.
couldn't use your sword or your weapon or do anything.
Huh.
But if you had like smashed a pot or like if there was something that you had already put onto the battlefield, then you could find it. Like you could still collect that in the last
Oh,
few seconds, like a gold, and some had like money in them or stuff like that. But it's just really weird because you couldn't interact. You could just pick up if there was something there. So
hmm.
I thought that was really weird.
That is odd. Um, but yeah. So a bit of the base mechanics from Three Houses, but like I said, it's streamlined a lot. You don't have
Okay.
to worry about schedules. There's just like certain things you can choose to do or not, and your time isn't divided up. Like if I fish, then I can't share a meal with somebody. It's just like there's a number of uses for one and another and another. You don't have to kind of pick and choose. So
So the real question is, can you hope that the person you love meets you at the big dance?
there is kind of a relationship mechanic in this. I'll say that.
Okay.
So, like, if you deepen your connection to a character to a certain degree, then you do have a stronger a bond with them. That's all I'll say. It's not quite to the level of like Fire Emblem Awakening, where you end up having kids with them, but
Whoa.
yeah, that one there's the whole timetable mechanic involved in that, and it's
Okay.
it's it's weird, but yeah, there's definitely a kind of relationship mechanic there. So
Okay.
yeah.
Because you could I mean, I don't know if they use the word married, but you essentially had like that special person in three houses.
Mhm.
Shout out to Petra and voice actress Fame out of that I follow on Twitter. Let's move on. But in three hopes, there was not that. You could get a good relationship with multiple people, but there was never really like any indication that there was like a special past that point.
Yeah, I don't.
Doesn't help
I
when the two people you love the most died in battles and you had to come up with your third choice. But
see
things happen. Things happen.
that kind of happened with me where I don't know if there is actually that final like marriage mechanic or whatever because yeah, the two that I was strong, that I had the strongest connection to ended up dying at different points during the story, and it's like, well, at this point, there's a few other characters I like, but I don't know. There's not enough time left in the plot to really get
Mm,
that close to them. So there might be, there might not. I'm not 100% sure on that. Um, but that said, the characters, for the most part, are interesting enough once you get to know them a bit. Some more than others. Like even the one who's just crazy about you find out more about her through her interactions with other characters, to the point where okay, that fleshes out her character a bit more. But if it's just you interacting with her, it's just be prepared for doe eyes and just complete obsession and cheerleading. It's yeah. So there's more depth to them than it seems a lot of the time, but it's a matter of finding those right conversation trees and learning about them that way.
okay.
So, but
Well,
overall, a likable cast.
um, as you're moving closer to a number on, you finished this one, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, as we're
Yeah,
moving
yeah.
closer, I didn't mention the so this has an 80% on Metacritic. So overall comparison here, we had Three Houses with an 89, Three Hopes with an 80, and Engage with an 80.
Mhm.
And then user scores, Three Houses 8.8, Three Hopes 8.9, Engage only has a 6.2 user score.
Ooh.
That's a significant drop off. So I'm curious your final rating on this one for sure.
Well, I personally, just compared to what I expected and what I got, it's not a perfect game. But I really enjoyed my time with it. I would give this one an 8,
Okay.
uh, because it's what I wanted out of a Fire Emblem game. But that said, there weren't a whole lot of surprises. I mean,
Mm,
the start of it was interesting and kind of different, but there were certain plot points that I called from a mile away, like, oh, that character is going to join me at some point, even though they're an enemy right now, and I was right. Certain things like that where
yeah.
they at times played it a little too safe with the
Okay.
story. But the combat was good. The cast of characters is big and there's a lot to choose from. So if you really don't like, oh yeah, so like if you don't like a certain character,
Oh yeah.
yeah, unless you're terrible at managing your squad, there's probably going to be someone else that can fit that role, and chances are you'll like them a bit better.
Hmm.
Some of them are a little one note, but yeah, it's with a cast this large. I mean, they can't all be, Game of Thrones level of depth. Um, but that said, I enjoyed the cast. I enjoyed the story, even if it was predictable. Combat's fun, and it's a very good looking game. Um, so and again, solid voice acting minus things like the meat song, uh, which again, if you know, you know. Uh, but yeah, it's a enjoyable game if you like strategy RPGs and if you like Fire Emblem as a whole. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't like this.
Okay. I was just checking. I had this at number 6 for my games I was looking forward to this year. So I'll have to eventually, I'm assuming I will pick this up and add it to the collection. I'm just buried right now with games, and I have Zelda coming out.
Mm.
Presumably the wrestling game that was supposed to be out like a year ago, but we'll see. Oh, and my Sea Rats game if that ever comes up. But
I have a feeling that'll be the last one to get released out of those three.
yeah, it might be.
My sympathies. I've been burned by Kickstarters before, so I understand that pain.
I just don't get it, man. But anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Any closing thoughts today? We did pretty good look at those three, I think.
Yeah. I would say I am happy that I decided all those years ago to pick up Smash Brothers Melee because without that I might not have ever really known about Fire Emblem. And I think a lot of people, like I said, that was their first exposure to this series as well. And it is a series that's worth pursuing, especially because you've got new entries that are coming out on a
Yeah.
semi-regular basis. Some of the older ones are hard to find and expensive at this point, but I think there's some available on like the Nintendo Switch online subscription. So if you're curious about some of the older ones, I think you can play those. At least the Game Boy Advance ones. I don't have the Nintendo Switch Plus, but I think some of the GBA ones are available on that. But they're usually not too terribly connected. So if you're curious about it and you're like, oh, I haven't played the first 14 games, I'm not going to know what's going on. You usually don't need that kind of baseline.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would help with some of the emblem characters in Engage, but yeah, I mean, you can still play it perfectly well without them, without knowing who they are, I should say.
There is a Fire Emblem Engage expansion pass on the Switch store.
Oh, I was actually not aware of that.
Oh, apparently there's a Three Houses expansion as well. Interesting.
Well,
Well,
well, depending on how much that trip I'm taking next month ends up costing, I might have to look into that.
Fire Emblem Awakening DLC pack. Oh, that's for Fire Emblem Warriors. I haven't played that. That was the first Musou style game
Okay.
they did. Last thing here I was just thinking of, because I haven't actually looked into it too much, but have you ever tried the Fire Emblem Heroes game for phones?
Mobile gaming just isn't my thing.
No.
I know of it. I have some friends who've played it.
Okay.
The art looks good, but it's just every mobile game I've tried to get into, I've dropped in short order just because it's not my style.
Yeah. I was just
And I
curious.
know that's very much a gotcha game where a lot of it is, you know, you spend the in-game currency or God forbid real money to try and, you know, get the characters you're looking for, and it's all random, and it's essentially just it's the loot boxes from say Overwatch except in with Fire Emblem, and you're trying to gamble for characters that you like or that have a special skin or whatever. And that sort of thing just doesn't do it for me.
Okay. That's intriguing. Looks like the expansion pass for Three Houses has several new chapters.
Ooh,
Several new chapters, a ton of new like costumes and blah 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 blah, all that stuff too. But I don't care about the story.
that's fair.
But
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way.
$25 though, better be a pretty good story. I don't know about that. So that's half.
Yeah, a lot of that might
game,
be
you know?
just cosmetics.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that more. I wasn't aware that was out there though. So good to know.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. I think that is going to do us here for another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. This has been Cody and Justin with all of you, and we still have a pretty good list of episodes we're looking forward to get here fairly soon as well. So we'll keep going with those and keep giving you some good content out there. I think I'd have to do yeah, I think this episode, Justin, is officially going to put us over 100 hours of content.
Woohoo!
So a little milestone there for us. So
And only 20 of that was not Star Wars related.
and only 80 of that was Justin's recap of The Cat Returns.
Oh man, it's a good movie.
It is. I tease. Okay, everybody. Well, we'll see you next time. I guess we'll do a little Fire Emblem homage. I don't know how we're gonna do that on the way out here, but
yeah, I don't have my orchestra in the background.
yes. So anyway, we'll see you next time on Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. Claude's a bastard. All right. See you, everybody.